I am Daniel Likus, and welcome to Movie 101 Review. And today we're having a Safa Sunday.
Hello, everybody. My name is Safa Burnell. I am a cyberpunk and mythpunk author and independent filmmaker who's sloughing off the rust of misuse and getting back into film. So I'm so glad to be here with everybody today.
Yes, because of that, Miss Bernard, let's have a big drum rolls. Oh, our studio is upgraded, so we are happy
Yes!
to giving you all these live sounds.
This is going to be fun.
It's gonna be fun. Every time we say something that is good, we're gonna give you drum rolls or for sure laughing.
Oh,
We laugh a
yeah.
lot, people. So, Miss Bernal, last week or last episode, we talked about.
Historical filmmaking.
Hmm.
And lots about costumes in historical filmmaking and what it means to wear certain clothes and how those clothes affect the way that you could present yourself in a movie, the way that you can move, and everything else like that. It was a lot of fun. I love talking about creating historical films and historical dramas. It is one of my joys. I'm a huge Shakespeare fan, so it's always a lot of fun to draw the boards or to make the pair of bodies possible for a costume to draw said boards.
Yes.
Not that you have to do Shakespeare in a historical way, but it's so fun.
It's fun under the sun, people. We are
Mm-hmm.
live on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. So please do watch us right now. So, Miss Bernal, what are some key characteristics that define historical movie?
Number one, you have to feel like you're in a specific sense of place. I think something that I see with a lot of people kind of getting into the mode of historical filmmaking, or even, writing historical books, historical scripts, is they have like one or two key moments in history that they think about, and then the rest of it is a little bit more generalized. And so I want to know that when I watch a movie that's, like Gladiator, that all of a sudden I go from, the forests of kind of Central Europe to Rome. And Rome is a very specific place during a very specific time, right at the end of Marcus Aurelius's reign. So I'm expecting to see certain costumes. I'm expecting to see certain architecture and certain people who are walking the streets, the way that they're conducting themselves, whether or not they're in, kind of an early Rome mode or whether you're in a later, more cosmopolitan Rome mode, that kind of thing I expect to be visible. I also expect to see the standards of the military people to bear certain kinds of arms and certain kinds of signatures and those eagles that they would walk in with, everything like that, like all of those I'm expecting to be fairly precise, because you're giving me a very precise time and place, something that we know a lot of because Rome is still occupied. We still know where Rome is. We see it. We have tons of information of what things looked like in those time periods. So I'm expecting to see, the same thing when I think of Shakespearean London. Well, we have a lot of extant records for what Shakespearean London looked like, what people did, what jobs they had. We have information on what people were actually doing with their lives and how their lives were functioning in Tudor London. So if that's the case, then I'm expecting to see Tudor London. I'm not necessarily expecting to see random, slightly medieval looking thatch roofed Wattle and Daub village, which could be replaced with anything else. If that's the case, I'm expecting that you've either created a fictitious village, which is totally fine and absolutely wonderful and does solve some of these problems, but I'm also expecting that, there's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief in there. So I'm expecting to see a very specific period of time. I'm expecting to feel a certain sense of place and a certain kind of technological level as well.
Yes, for sure. Miss Bernal, we just say hi to Brahim for saying hi, hello, hello. We're live
Hello.
on LinkedIn.
Hi, Brahim. Hello. How are you today? I hope you're doing fantastic. I hope you're having a great day, night, evening, afternoon, whatever time zone you're in. And everybody, if you're
Yes,
watching us live, please make sure to say hi because we would love to say hello back.
yes, for sure. So, Miss Bernal, which historical movies we gonna talk about today?
Mm, I would love to talk about a couple. Alexander from 2004. It had a few iterations of the movie. Definitely the director's cut, yet again, is going to be the one that I will focus on because I do tend to watch director's cuts more than the theatrical releases. I also would love to talk about Master and Commander, which is a completely different time period than Alexander. And I would love to talk about Kingdom of Heaven, which is another
Kingdom of
Ridley Scott.
Heaven.
Yeah, Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut. Again, Ridley Scott, especially early Ridley Scott movies, I always watch the director's cut. Kingdom of Heaven is basically a crusade movie. And there's a lot that you could be like, okay, that's interesting. But one of the things I love about Kingdom of Heaven is how humanizing that they were to all sides of an incredibly complicated era in history with just very complex characters and the politics going, between one and another. And I love how real all of the characters felt, and just the visuals were astounding. The visuals, the battle scenes, oh my goodness, they were just fantastic. But I really like, being able to see how complicated and complex history is, especially since there are several time periods in history where some people can be like, well, this very black and white, this is the enemy, this is the good person, here's evil, here's good, there it is, there's a huge vast valley in the middle, there's no, there you go. And it's like that. That's not history. That's not history. There are beautiful people, and there are people on every side of every kind of possible conflict or conjoining of cultures. There's so much beauty, and there's so much just compassion and wonder and amazement and strength in every culture on this planet, that it's nice to see a historical film where it's not, these ones are in the dark costumes, these ones were in the beige and white costumes. So clearly the beige and white costumes are the victors, and, getting back to the old standard when it comes to a lot of, like, especially you see this in cowboy narratives where, the guy in the white hat is the good guy, the guy in the black hat is the bad guy, because TVs were this big and they had no other way of identifying who's who. It's like we've gone better. We have grown since then. We are able to tell more complex stories, and that's what I like to see.
For sure. And thank you, Martin, for liking our live videos right now. Thank you so
Thank you,
much. So,
Mart.
how accurately do historical movies need to portray real events to be considered successful?
I think if your marketing is based on this is as historically accurate as possible, we went into the extant texts and directly ripped all of the lines of the dialogue from what we know from literature, then I'm expecting that it is as accurate as possible to what we can suppose. Being that we don't, unless you're a conspiracy theorist, we don't have a time machine. We don't have the ability to see what actually happened. So no matter what we do, it's an interpretation of past events. So while I think that if you're looking at it going, this is the information we have, what kind of story can I tell from these facts? That I really like. If you're looking at the facts of the matter and going, yes, but this is my agenda, this is what I want people to see, so I'm just going to glance over all of these things and I am going to change events and I'm going to modify things until it's a story that I want to tell. Well, once you get to that point, then I have a sincere question to ask as to whether or not you want to tell a historical event or whether you just want to tell something in a historical style that's complete fiction. There's nothing wrong with doing something inspired by an event, but that's a complete work of fiction. That's actually a lot of fun. You see, 300. That's not how it happened. That's not how, Gerard Butler and, Michael Fassbender and all those guys, they were not there topless fighting against Persians with some weird kind of smoky magic going on. That's likely not how the Battle of Thermopylae happened, but it was still an homage to the battle. So with something like 300, you can kind of sensationalize and make it this very different story, this very comic booky, sensational story, but you're saying this is an homage to that historical event. That's fine if they were like, oh, this is the most historically accurate 300, like this is the most historically accurate Battle of Thermopylae you're ever going to see in the entirety of your life. Is it though? No. I don't think it is. You can't say that it is. Just say that it is an homage to something. So, and I know that's kind of a roundabout answer to your question. I don't know if there's any specific, like, this is the line you cannot cross. I think it comes down to intent and research. If your intention is to tell the story like it is, then I'm expecting to see certain things, however glorifying or ingratiating they might be. I think that Scott did this kind of, world of gray storytelling quite well in The Last Duel. It was a difficult movie to watch. And I think, there was a lot of talk at the time about how potentially poorly it did in the box office. But when you look at what the world was going through in the time that it was actually released, maybe a quite dark, somewhat grim story with a lot of gray and no real heroes. Maybe that wasn't the kind of thing that people needed when they were like, I don't know what to do, and the entire world feels a little depressed. Just kind of, like, you got to pick your moments. Was it a real well-made film? Absolutely. Was it kind of as accurate as you could potentially get to the nature of certain characters given the information that we have? There's an argument to be made. And yet at the same time, it wasn't this person good, that person bad, go. It was more complex than that. And I really like that part of it as well. But I really do think that it comes down to intention and whether or not you're researched enough to make that call without just relying on sources that make you feel better.
Feel better, yes. And let's thank you for, or shout out to Miss what her name, for liking our video,
Thank you so
live
much.
video, Priyanshi, if I pronounced correctly. Thank you for liking our videos right now. So what are some common themes to explore in historical movies?
Big hearts.
Oh, just give
Big
a big,
hearts, the
big,
people
big
who
drum
like
roll.
big hearts. Ba, 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 ba.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're so happy here that we are
Oh,
evolving. And every Sunday we're live from Movie 101 Review and
yeah.
Book 101 Review.
Make sure
So
to stay
please
tuned.
stay tuned,
Yeah.
people. So, Miss Bernal, what are some common themes explored in historical movies?
Political intrigue, especially when you get into Roman era and various kinds of eras. Even you could say that political intrigue played a part in the movie, like The Last Samurai, where, the samurai were not going to go gently. They were not going to do, what was expected of them. They were going to continue to live their culture. I think you see this especially too. There is a host of beautiful Korean political dramas that are just fantastically well done. They're just, the costumes are on point, the direction is on point, the tension is incredible. You've got some pulled in performances that are just so tight and I just love it. I think political intrigue is something that you could tell very well, especially if you're doing sort of court drama and that kind of thing, depending on where you are in the world. Like, there are incredible movies coming out of China where they're looking at court drama and things going on with the emperor and concubines and different people trying to take control of the empires in various points in time. And you can tell such incredibly vivid political stories so well. And it's gripping. It's absolutely gripping. So definitely, I would say court drama and politics. You get politics a lot in Rome. You get politics, these even little bits of it in movies like Troy, where you have Agamemnon
Mm.
trying to hold on to all of these disparate nation states that were known as Greece, in the Hellene period and the pre-classical period, that you could kind of put Troy into the Battle of the Iliad, I should say. I think too, you can tell, the court dramas of Europe. There's a lot of intrigue in those courts with the various kings and queens, whether that is Catherine the Great of Russia or the Medicis or the Tudors, or even earlier than that, going into, early Anglo-Saxon periods with something like Vikings or Vikings Valhalla. There's so many different sort of intrigues that you can tell on which person's going to end up with power. And so those can be very cool. I think another thing that historical movies do really well is romance.
Yes.
Not necessarily talking about Bridgerton, although Hala, like, my my sister and I were watching Bridgerton together, and I'm not the hugest fan of romance stories myself. I'm a lot more, give me a rousing war epic, or give me Gladiator. But for my sister, absolutely, I'll sit down with some bucket of popcorn and we'll watch Bridgerton. And I have to say, I enjoyed it. There was a lot to like. There was a lot to be like, okay, that's not an accurate costume, but I really like it. So romance does very well. You see romances like Jane Eyre, done in 2011, again with Michael Fassbender. In it, you've got tons of Jane Austen kind of Regency era movies, but you also have just Tristan and Isolde. You have an incredible amount of doomed romances. Again, I watch a lot of doomed romances coming out of Korea. I absolutely love them. There's like, oh, this is not going to end well. It's not going to be pretty, but you know what? We will find catharsis in the end. I'm here for that story. I think that historical fiction does really well with romance, because I think, too, a historical fiction piece is going to connect best when it's connecting to something that's intrinsically human. And our relationships, our ability to connect to other people, our ability to fall in love, our ability to be part of a family, the complex emotions involved when your family's expectations are one way and your heart goes another. All of these things don't change. The dressings around it change, the costumes change, even what those choices mean to society might change. But that intrinsic point of a relationship, that intrinsic point of humans being humans in a space together, it's astoundingly familiar when you look at historical records and you see what few records we do actually have. And so that's something that I particularly think, if your story, is something that everyone can connect to in some way, shape, or form, that there's a character somebody can connect to within it, and you're having that search for meaning and connection, you're having that search for relationship and connection, whether that's a romantic relationship or a political one, or, a relationship for safety's sake or friendship, whatever it is, wherever that relationship goes on the scale, I think those things can really be done very well. And then I know this is just kind of a more on how I grew up, but you can't necessarily talk about historical filmmaking and what historical filmmaking is without mentioning the sheer amount of historical filmmaking done of religious topics. So whether that is, the movies about Jesus from a Christian perspective, whether that is movies about the Buddha, whether that is movies about, there's a lot of Buddhist myths out of Japan that have been made into films. There's really cool animation going through a whole bunch of kind of Buddhist folk tales and different things like that, and Buddhist history movies that are incredibly well done. And they're beautiful and they're lilting and they're a little bit more passive in certain things. They're not kind of like active right in your face with shots changing every 2 seconds. That's what I mean by passive, is kind of longer shots, kind of something. And they're just amazing. So I think that's that's another thing that you can kind of look to as well. Various religious themes that are done quite well.
Yes, amazing and very well said, Mr. Bernal. And let's give you a big hand for that. And woohoo! So, Miss Bernal, let's shout out our listeners from where? Can you read us,
Oh,
Miss
a
Bernal?
special shout out today for our
Yes.
listeners from Bolivia, Slovenia, Thailand, Nigeria, and Mexico. Thank you so much for making Movie
Smack.
101 review part of your day, evening, afternoon, night, time zone.
Yes, being part of your life is so big for us. So, Miss Bernal, how do historical movies influence public perceptions of historical events and figures?
First and foremost, a lot of, depending on the historical event and how famous of an event it is, this may be a lot of people's first and potentially only interaction with that period in history. And so it's very important right off, kind of what I would say in Book 101 review is looking at the back of the book. You're looking at that initial synopsis, you're looking at that initial, the movie posters and the trailers to see whether or not this is meant to be something historically accurate or this is an homage done in a historical fashion. I think that becomes very important because again, you're kind of giving people the idea of whether or not that they should see this and be like, oh wow, this is how it was. Maybe, probably not. There's a lot of movie magic involved. There's a lot of things that end up being kind of trimmed and cut and moved around and just made different because that's how the magic of filmmaking works. And that's, the production costs. And let's be honest here, most people would not be there for a 6-hour movie about a woman making cheese just so that you can have the accuracy of the dairy, like,
Yes, for sure.
I'll go watch Victoria Farm, which, if you've ever seen, there is a series of documentary series from England called Edwardian Farm, Wartime Farm, Victorian Farm, Tudor Monastery Farm, a whole bunch of things where two archaeologists and a domestic historian, they basically live on a farm with only the technology and the clothing that they would have had in, say, the Tudor monastery period of English history. And they run the farm that way. And so you're able to see all the different things that are different and the same based on what that was. So that's a historical documentary series. Well, I'm not expecting something like The Revenant or something like, Alexander to be a historical documentary. I'm expecting it to be sensationalized. I'm expecting certain things to be different and certain clothing pieces to be a little bit different because of costuming needs and different things like that. But I think that a good historical fiction piece is going to get somebody interested enough in the time period that they go look up the academics for themselves. Or not even academics, just a documentary, something that's meant to be a little bit more precise. And let's be honest, there have been some documentaries released in the last couple of years that have been less precise. And we're called on that to a degree where even the nation in which that documentary was about threatened to sue. I don't know what happened with that. I'd have to look into it, but I'm not going to mention any names just because I'm not going to get into the drama, but there is a certain expectation of accuracy in a documentary. I think that people can very easily expect that a historical movie is accurate without doing their research. And that can cause misconceptions. It can cause a little bit of harm. I mean, I think from the perspective of somebody Scandinavian, I don't know how many times I've listened to either a documentary or a literary theorist or somebody talking about books and movies and being astounded when they discovered that Vikings were very clean. Like, yes, for years, for decades and decades, when you saw a Viking marauder in a film, they were this gritty, dirty, bad teeth, plaited braids, going around like swinging their sword and their shield with lecherous eyes to attack the fair maiden and the whole thing. And it's like, as somebody who is Scandinavian myself, I'm going, well, yes, but look at the historical records. We have more combs and grooming products in grave goods than anything else. We are very fastidiously clean because and that was a very big thing in a lot of Norse and Scandinavian culture too, because especially in Norway in historical periods of time, because it was so cold, you had one big bed. Like you'd pull out the trundle and like you'd sleep the whole family in one bed. So if that's the case and you're sleeping with like 7 people in the same bed, you better not smell. You need to
For
be
sure.
clean. You're sleeping beside grandma. Like,
Take
you
a
know,
bath 3 times a day.
oh, they were so fastidiously clean that we have historical records from the Anglo-Saxon period in England, where a lot of the gentlemen who were from England were like, we have to get rid of these guys because they're stealing all our women because they're so clean and they smell so good and they always look so good. All the ladies are like, dude, you know what? This man, I think I could get along with. So the ladies were like, I like your smell. you know?
For sure. So, Miss Bernal, can you name a historical movie that has been praised for its historical accuracy?
Ooh. Master and Commander. Number one. Love it. Master and Commander. That one is a Napoleonic War naval movie starring Russell Crowe and hold on, Master and Commander and Paul Bettany. And it was directed by Peter Weir. It takes place on, a ship during the Napoleonic Wars, and it's just naval life. Naval life, the way that they did naval life, the way that they had the costumes, and the way that they had people wearing their costumes, the narrowness of the areas in the ship that you could actually go in under decks. I was a little disgusted by, but I loved the scene where we are in the captain's mess and they're eating old hardtack and there's maggots in it. And they actually show that there were magnets in this hardtack. And I mean, Food 101, yummy, hardtack. But shout out to Food 101 review. But they actually had the captain laughing about it and being like, hey, protein, like, okay, because they wouldn't have had, huge amounts of provisions and they wouldn't have had a lot of other things. And so eventually some of these things, it's moist, even if this is hardtack, you're still on the sea, things are salty and moist and there's things are going to grow. The way that they did the battles and the cacophony of the cannons and the way the wood splintered and just all of it, the whole thing. I absolutely love Master and Commander. Billy Boyd did a fantastic job as a coxswain, as Barrett Bondin. You've got Max Pierkis, you've got Max Bennett, you've got Paul Bettany as a doctor, and you've also got this sort of subplot in there as well of the doctor being interested in Darwin, and they end up going towards the Galapagos and all of those kinds of things happening there. So you get to see more than just the naval officers kind of microcosm. You're also seeing how the world is changing, how different scientific thoughts were modifying the way that people searched for things, the way that people looked at the world. You're seeing all of these things put together in just a raucous tale, which is it's one of my fondest movies. I think that Master and Commander is a fabulous way to look at historical accuracy in a film and to look at really being placed in a sense of time. And I mean, this is coming from somebody who watched a lot of Horatio Hornblower, featuring Jon Griffud. That was another one that was a mini series that I had. I still have the DVDs, if you can imagine. I still have DVDs of Horatio Hornblower.
Not
That was another one in the
Betamax.
Napoleonic Wars. But yeah, Master and Commander, definitely love it.
Yes, for sure. And thank you, Navangha, Rai, for watching our live video. So,
Thank you.
to sum up, Miss Burnell, what are some of the biggest challenges in creating historical movie?
Last week we talked about set and finding locations. So I'm not going to mention that part of it, even though it is a big part. If you want to know more about, the difficulties of finding locations that fit with historical kind of eras and things like that, please watch last week's Movies 101 review. That would be there. I'm sure we'll put a link somewhere, or if you
Yes.
found us here, you'll find us there. And you can always follow Daniel Lucas on YouTube and watch it anytime you like. And I've also talked a lot about the costumes too, so I'm going to put the costumes aside, even though as a costumer myself, I always love talking about the costumes. I want to say one of the biggest things is not sounding too modern. So we get this a lot, especially in more European-based historical fiction. People either sound like they're a Cockney gutter snipe, and oi, oi, governor, what's up then there, oi, 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 and you're like, that's not the accent that people had in the Shakespearean era.
And
Oh,
different.
how did they sound? Well, they sounded very different. We actually have lots of, historians who have studied different accents and what they were like over time, what English sounded like over time. If you're doing something in the time of Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales, then you're almost sounding very French. You're sounding a lot different than somebody who's speaking English with my sort of West Coast Canadian accent that I've currently got on right now. So accents, the way people talked, different idioms. So all speech, and especially for people, shout out to my people whose English is not your first language. I'm here for you. I am with you. I also grew up speaking other languages than English as a small child. So English is the language I speak most now, but it wasn't at certain points in my life. Shout out to how difficult it is to understand various idioms, various phrases, and turns of phrase. Well, those phrases change over time. One of my big ones when I'm editing people's work, in the literary sphere, or when I'm doing my live streams on Twitch at Usurper Kings, where I do free literature critiques, is the use of okay. Okay, AY. Okay. That is a political term based from the United States. That's where okay came from. So unless you are using it in the political context that it came from back in that time, I mean, it has progressed since then to mean something different. Now it's just like, oh, okay, it's just part of the English language, and that's totally fine now. But if you're telling me that this is something where we're talking about the English language in the 1700s, nobody should be saying okay. Not that we
Yes.
have to be precise to the word, but you should be able to tell through someone's dialogue where they are, what time period they're in, what kind of grammatical structure are you using, especially in various eras of time. Language changes so much. You should get some of those idioms that they were talking about. Victorian era idioms are fascinating and crazy. I would love to see more of them in Victorian era films. The same thing, across the board, across the world. Language changes. I would love to see more of dialogue changing to match the language that it came from. And then you can still make it understandable. If somebody's using like, oh, yeah, that's a sticky wicket. What? it's hard. Like, oh, yeah. Okay, you can do things like that. I mean, that's kind of the Fraggle Rock effect, if I could say that. Jim Henson, back in the day with Fraggle Rock, he would put in really big words and then have another one of the Fraggles be like, "Oh yeah, blah 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 blah," in simpler language, and that was how he taught, certain larger words to children. Um but that kind of thing can work with idioms too, and I would love to see it more, instead of just getting, this is slightly cockney guy, this is very Shakespearean actor person. Well, that Shakespearean actor voice is actually something that comes out of theater and not out of how people talked back in the day. The same thing with the transatlantic accent. That was something that was developed to make media more understandable to more people. It wasn't something that people actually spoke necessarily. So I'd love to get, come on, give me some idioms about, horses and hay. Like, give me something that, give me these terms that we do actually have in various ways of how people talked and what kind of idioms we can bring back.
Yes, yes, yes. Because of that, Miss Burnell. Wow. Bravo. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Music 101, on our second season. I have a new co-host, Mr. Mickey Smith. We talk about the legendary Ian Hunter. So please do listen, Music 101, for a new season. And Miss Bernal, can you please plug in your books?
Hi, everybody. My name again is Safa Burnell. I am an author. I write mostly cyberpunk and mythpunk, but I also write some historically based mythpunk in there as well. You can find me at safaburnell.com. That is SAPHABURNELL.com. You can also find me on social media at Usurper Kings. Usurper Kings was the name of my first book, and I am so proud of the little poetry book that could. Its 10th anniversary edition is live. I can't believe it's been 10 years since Usurper Kings first hit stores, and now there is a new edition with a new foreword and a new poem in there as well. And if you like action, if you like deeply emotive characters, if you like lots of relationships and lots of, battling emotions and battles of will, then I think you like my novels like Neon Lieben, Char and Dash, Son of Abel, Book of Rebels, and my novella Whiskey and Sinner's Blood. And so I hope you check me out. You can check my books out, actually. Sorry, I'm
Check,
married.
yes.
Speaking of idioms, there we go. I hope you check
Yes.
out my books. And if you are able, I hope you give them a purchase, give them a read. And otherwise, I hope that you go to your local public library, if you have one around where you are, and ask them to bring in my books. That is a wonderful way for a lot of people to be able to read them. And I get very excited when I find out that my books are in new libraries. So thank you very much, everybody.
Yes. Yes, people, let's support Miss Safa Bernal, because if you support him, more books to come. We're looking for Ginangagap. And we talked about last 2 weeks on Book 101 review.
Yeah. So,
Agape Maki.
yes, that
Please.
is.
Yes.
So Agape Maki is historical fantasy, and it comes from the classical Hellene time period. It's the story of Ares and Aphrodite that I'm currently in the middle of producing, and I'm putting us into the Mycenaean time period and having a lot of fun. I'm doing a
Having a
lot of
lot of
historical
fun.
research. There's a
Thank you,
lot of
Peter.
watching.
Yes. Thank you, Peter, for watching us. Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Peter.
Please tune in for our Book 101 review, because we're closing now our Movie 101 review. We're going to our Safa Sunday for Book 101 review. And again, people, thank you so much for supporting us. Bolivia, thank you so much. What is their language in Bolivia? I think it's uh, Spanish.
Spanish, I believe. Yeah, I believe one of the
Spanish,
languages is
right?
Spanish. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Moricam people, see you
Gracias.
soon. Okay, Miss Bernal, are you ready for Book 101 review?